welcome back to Wednesday Live, coming to you from Pocatello, Idaho, in the beautiful Portneuf Valley in the southeast corner of Idaho, gateway to the great Northwest. And if you haven't seen it, you have to see it to believe it. It is a beautiful place to visit. We have a lot to cover tonight. Some interesting things have happened since we spoke last week. It seems to be the case every week, but and that's good. It gives me a reason to keep coming on the program, and hopefully for you to keep tuning in. You don't have to. I'm not competing with any major shows tonight. I hope, Dancing with the Stars or something. So maybe we'll have a few of our regular visitors, and which we're getting more. I'm very grateful to you folks that are tuning in. Please tell your friends, your family, anybody you think might be interested in some of our point of view, or if they just want to see what I have to say, have them tune in. Real easy to find us. All you have to do is Google YouTube. When you get to YouTube, Google Ralph Lillig, and that'll give you a series that actually give you all of my shows that we've started putting on YouTube. And I'm going to ask you tonight, as I always do, first of all, please get a pencil and paper and take a few notes if it's something you think is noteworthy. But if you're going to look up my program, and I hope you look up March 12th. Now, that was 2 weeks ago tonight, and then you'll understand more about that as the show progresses. But anyway, welcome, my friends. Thank you for coming back. God bless you. I hope you have an interesting evening. As I do every week at this time, I want to remind you about Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center. 208 is the area code for the entire state of Idaho, so that's not too difficult. 208-478-HOPE. As I always tell you, and I say this with absolute truth and no guile whatsoever, these folks are doing God's work. They are the antithesis, if you will, everything opposite of Planned Parenthood. These people are about life. They're not about ending life. They're not about planning your parenthood, about getting rid of babies. They operate on a shoestring. They don't have a huge budget. They don't have a lot of federal money. They don't have any federal money. They get a very small amount of United Way money. And when you see all of the different people that United Way gives money to, it doesn't leave much left over for pro-life. But 478-HOPE, please look them up and see what you can do. And with that, well, here we go again. My friend and yours, or at least my friend and his, Mike O'Donnell, has decided to go after me personally once again. And Mike, you've got to find something to do in your spare time. This fixation you seem to have with me is not healthy, Mike. People are starting to talk. I'm worried about when I'm going to start getting candy and flowers from you. Let me just say, like they would say in Hollywood, honey, sweetie, baby, boobala, get a life, find something to do. Don't make your whole news career on me. You've got things that you have the capability. You don't need to try to take it out on me if you just don't like the way I walk and talk or appear. This past Sunday, Mike decided to go after me very personally. Very interesting the way he did this too. He decided to grandize, or he decided to really build up former Governor Phil Batt. And as I told you when I spoke to you last week or week before, on the 12th, March the 12th, this is important for you to remember because you may want to look it up. March the 12th of this year, I mentioned, I read from a column that was written by Phil Batt. And Phil Batt had a number of things to say. And as I said then, and I haven't taken the time to look any further on who Phil Batt is, I'll take it all from good old Mike O'Donnell, the paragon and the fountain of all knowledge and truth, that Phil Batt is a pretty nice guy, I guess. I don't know. I wasn't saying he wasn't a nice guy. Didn't say he was a bad guy. Didn't say he was a liberal or conservative as such. I didn't know him. I said as I was talking, reading about his letter to the editor, that after reading his letter to the editor, I felt like I kind of knew him. Now, it's interesting if you read Mike O'Donnell's column, and by the way, Mike, I got to thank you. Every time you do a hit piece on me, my ratings go up. I picked up 20 new subscribers just since Sunday, and thank you, Mike. You're the gift that keeps on giving. Thank you very much. So Mike decided that he wanted to embarrass me, and he did it the same old sleazy left-hand way the Saul Alinsky way is take your eye off the ball and don't talk about whatever the situation is. Build another case, something separate altogether. And rather than go after the message, go after the messenger. And of course, Mike has shown that he loves to go after me. Mike, it reminds me of that Elmer Fudd guy that's always looking for that wascally rabbit.
well, we're going willig hunting. It's willig season, and we're going to get ourselves a willig, wascally willig. We're gonna find him, and we're going to stab him with our pen 1,000,000 times. That's what we're going to do. That's kind of the way it's starting to look, without the flowers and the candy, of course. At any rate, he decided, Mr. O'Donnell decided to go after me and talk about what a great guy Phil Batt is, all the great things he did for the state. I don't deny any of them. I don't know, I didn't study up on him. I didn't think that the minute I read O'Donnell's column, I had to think, oh my goodness, I better check this out. I've been horrible. No, I'll take O'Donnell's word. It's very interesting that O'Donnell decided to use, and Phil Batt, I've spoken to a friend of mine who has lived here most of her life, if not all of it, very politically connected, and she said, Ralph, Phil Batt is not a conservative. And I know the lady well enough to take it to the bank. If she said he is not, then I believe her, and I believe that's true. That aside, that wasn't what I was talking about. In fact, the only thing that I made any real discussion about was he was talking about his grandson and his granddaughter having to leave the area to go to school elsewhere because they didn't feel welcome here. Actually, he didn't include his granddaughter as not feeling welcome. He was talking about his grandson, who is LGBT, gay, however you want to say it, and how it was he was not being well received here and had been picked on by his buddies and schoolmates when he was a kid in Boise, and moved to another state, California, where he established residency, went to university, and doing very well. And my only comment on that was, good. I'm glad he's doing well. So what's your point? My grandson had to leave and go to another state. He's working in the fast food industry, working his way through college because the college courses he would like to have are not offered in this state. And so he had to leave, and he's working his way through school, and I love him. I think he's a great kid. So, I worked my way through college. Probably a whole lot of you did. My granddaughter, my number 3 granddaughter, is going to have to leave the state and go elsewhere. And, we're not a big family of means. She'll have to work while she's in college. My number 2 granddaughter will eventually have to leave here because besides the fact that the educational things aren't here, the opportunities aren't here. Now, does that have anything to do with being LGBT or being straight? Absolutely not. And I'm sorry that Mr. O'Donnell was offended by the fact that I mentioned that straight kids have the same problems with making a living and making a go in the world as LGBT kids, but they do. That's the reality of it. So anyway, O'Donnell did his usual thing of showing he didn't like the word disdain, and I find it interesting because I didn't use it. Phil Batt used it, but he attributed it to me. I would ask you, I would urge you, if you haven't done this already, now if you've seen the program live, you may not be interested in seeing it again, but it might not hurt if you would take the time to, it doesn't cost you anything. If you have a computer and you know how to do the basics, and that's as far as I get. This ballpoint pen gets very technical for me. The other day I was demonstrating that to a friend of mine. He started clicking it and I got confused. So I understand that computers are not everybody's really savvy on computers, but even I can do this. Simply pull up Google YouTube. When YouTube comes up, hit you and click on YouTube, and then in the space up there put Ralph Lillig and click on that, and it'll take you right to all of the shows that we have put up on YouTube. And the show that Mike O'Donnell was knocking me on was the show that I did on March 12th. And I would ask you, share that with your friends. I think it really would be good if you watched the program and then read his article. And the article, as I said, it was in last Sunday's Idaho State Journal. It's titled, Have You No Shame? And after reading his article, Mr. O'Donnell, I would ask you, have you no shame? Twisting things, turning things around, going out of your way to burn me and not even talking about the issue. Please, Mike, if you're going to do a hit piece on me, at least have the decency to do it right. Do it with some decency. Have you no shame? And I thought it interesting that he had to go to one of his, I'm sure it's one of his icons that used that against Dan Quayle. When Dan Quayle was making a point, I forget the political point, but it was a conservative point, and I don't remember the senator's name that was running against him. Not one that was one of my favorites. And he went off on Dan Quayle, and then when he got all done, he said, Mr. Quayle, have you no shame? And so now Mike, Mr. Originality, used that on Ralph, have you no shame? And I would say, Mike, have you no shame? Well, enough of that. So the wascally rabbit's right here, Mike. You just can continue watching and using your sharpened pen to wascally go after me.
And I think it's unfortunate that that's the way he does things, but, well, that's the way big city press like Idaho State Journal likes to run their show, I guess. Anyway, all right, let's, and then last night, I if it weren't so sad, it would be funny. Richard Ike, who has I think it was a Tuesday, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday night program. I happened to be channel surfing, looking for something else. Saw him. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't channel surfing. I got a phone call. Somebody said, Ralph, you need to look at Channel 12. Richard Ike's going off on you. Well, it's not the first time Mr. Ike has gone off on me. He doesn't know me. All he knows is what he reads in the paper or he gets from one of his left-wing friends. In this case, he basically read O'Donnell's column, and then he put his 2 cents worth in. I've never said anything ill about Ike, and there's no need to. He speaks for himself. But I thought it was interesting that the way the left likes to dogpile on their latest cause. And so now Richard Ike has, this is at least 2, maybe the 3rd time that Ike has gone after me for something. His commentary are not quite as clever as Mike's, so he used Mike's. And that's all right. Richard, if you want a piece of me, just go for it. Have your fun if you want to. Anyway, so there have been some interesting things that have happened since last week. Last week, you may recall that I introduced you to this new group calling itself Fair Pocatello. And I have to correct myself on something I said there. Fair Pocatello has enlisted the help of James Ruckty, former legislator, well-known and successful attorney in town, big name, and I think he has been past chair of the Democrat Party in Bannock County. I'm not sure about that, but he's connected. He's connected on the left to the liberal stuff. So he is the attorney of record for the Fair Pocatello group. And then Brenda Stanley has signed on to be their public spokesperson, I guess. I understand that they are not paid staff, that they are volunteers. So they feel strongly enough about LGBTQ issues or LGBT issues that they've signed on as volunteers. Why Fair Pocatello needs an attorney is beyond me. I don't know. But anyway, so I need to correct that. But now Fair Pocatello, interesting piece of information I picked up here. They're already, all of the LGBT support group, the network, which is a very, very busy network. And most of the time they're talking to each other, but sometimes they say things that we all might be interested in. One thing that came up this last week was Susan Matsura doing a fundraiser, and I'll just read her, let's see, this is, okay, paid for by Fair Pocatello, Audrey Cole, treasurer. Don't know who Audrey is, don't care, she's the treasurer. So here's what Susie Matsura, let's see, this is fundforidaho.org. Subject, I need your help again, dear. Have you checked out the website for our campaign, Fair Pocatello? Please be sure to check Faces of Fairness while you're there. And as of this writing, there are 4 faces and 4 stories. One of them is mine. It explains why I believe in this campaign and our fairness ordinance. That's what they're calling the non-discrimination ordinance, which is completely unfair to everybody else, but they think of it as their fairness ordinance. They being LGBT and their supporters. It explains why I believe in this campaign and our fairness ordinance. This is what it is about: fairness, opportunity, and equality. Stop the presses. It's exactly the opposite. It is unfair. It does not give anybody opportunity except the few that are part of this thing. And opportunity, well, I would say that look around those people you know, and I've said this before, and I say it again. Look at the people you know who are LGBT. Tell me how many of those you see that are not already being treated fairly, that are not already successful, that are not already walking equally with the rest of us. Nobody has to step off the sidewalk when you pass. It's none of that. So that whole fairness is baloney. I mean, it is unfair what they're doing to this community and what they plan to do to the entire nation. But I digress. This is what it is about: fairness, opportunity, and equality. Unfortunately, fairness has been challenged in Pocatello, and we are at risk of losing our ordinance if we don't work hard to explain why it is so important to keep it. Working hard means volunteering, knocking on doors, committing to vote, telling the story, and donating money. I wrote my check out last week and I didn't scrimp because it is so important to me and my family. I want to encourage each of you to do the same as much as you can. I don't like it when I get a solicitation call saying, I think you can give XX number of dollars. Each one of you knows what you can give. I would like to encourage you to give a little more than what you think you can. If it is $25, please consider $50. If it is more than that, can you add a zero at the end? Can you give $5 or $10 more above what you usually would? You get the picture. Push yourself a little bit. Pocatello should keep its place on the list of cities in Idaho that have passed non-discrimination ordinance. Remember, we're number 7. Right now, we are one of 7. I'm proud of that. All of our efforts secured that spot. Those of you who supported me wrote letters, testified, spoke out. Let's keep our title. The first step is making sure we have the money we need to run a strong campaign. Now think a minute what they mean by a strong campaign. They're not talking about getting somebody elected to office. They're talking about supporting this ordinance that is the epitome of unfair. But they're willing, they're organized, and they want to work hard to raise money. Please make a contribution today to stand up for fairness, opportunity, and equality for everyone in Pocatello. Thanks for your support. Let's keep Pocatello fair. And then she put a, okay, now I don't know how this works because she put this out there on the internet and then she put a copyright Fair Pocatello. I guess copywriting the name of Fair Pocatello, all rights reserved. Well, I'm not going to use Fair Pocatello, Susie. So. All right, anyway, that's, it's interesting. I found it indicative and illustrative of how far these folks are willing to go to ramrod this thing. Now, here's the thing that has kind of added a new dimension to Fair Pocatello. Now has, they have a website. You can go on there and you can see people who are advocating for the LGBT non-discrimination ordinance. And there are a whole lot of people that would rather not be on there, and I understand that. They're not willing to, I don't know, put their face in public. I understand that. But now Fair Pocatello has aligned itself with HRC, Human Rights Campaign. Human Rights Campaign, and I think I touched on this last week, but I'm going to do it again because it is huge. It is really huge. I went to their website today. It took a little to get there. In fact, my wife had to find it for me because they are in this HRC, Human Rights Campaign, is in all 50 states. So if you just run Human Rights Campaign, you're going to get, she told me it didn't go to the headquarters, which is what we're looking at. So we wanted to see who they are. Well, they're an organization that was founded in 1980. So this agenda has been running for a while. And of course, if you watch my program regularly, or even sporadically, you've seen in the past that we've spoken to you about the gay rights agenda, the LGBTQ agenda. And a fellow named Glenn Alford says there is no agenda, and then they say themselves there is an agenda, very definitely. So this group, HRC, or Human Rights Campaign, was formed in 1980. They have 1.5 million members. Think of the size. That's the entire population of the state of Idaho. That's how many members are subscribers or members of HRC. They have millions and millions and millions of dollars budget. They have high-profile spokespeople, especially in Hollywood. Some of those are names you look at and you say, oh my, you know, has the world gone Looney Tunes? Well, I think it has. This is big, and these folks have decided now that they're going to make Pocatello a target campaign. They're going to really push hard here. Now, I'm not exactly sure, because I haven't got the goods yet on how they plan to lay out things here. They're going to advertise. They have millions of dollars to do it, and they want to spend it. They're very capable of doing it. They're going to have, as they put it in their propaganda, they put out boots on the ground. This organization is so big that it has a huge staff, most of whom are paid minimum wage, or not most of, a lot of them are minimum wage and part-time, but they have a huge staff. They even, on their website, you can look at career opportunities. So you have people whose entire career is fighting to be unfair to the rest of the nation, to have their little piece of the pie that they want, that we all have to deal with. I'm not describing it as well as I could. Anyway, this is a big group. They offer a retirement program, medical, dental, and eye care, it's a huge organization, and these people are coming here in force. And I anticipate they're going to be knocking on our doors, taking surveys. They've already had, Fair Pocatello had a robo survey. I haven't heard anything more about it, haven't seen anything in the paper, so maybe it didn't go quite like they wanted. But HRC this is the rest of Goliath jumping into our little cub den here. And folks, it's going to get nasty, because they plan to make it nasty. And they're going to continue to be unfair, regardless of what they call themselves. They are going to continue to be bigoted. They are going to continue to be anti-family, anti-property rights. And remember this, we haven't really got to this as much as we probably could have. The issue here has been clouded because it came in as a so-called non-discrimination ordinance. But the reality of it is this is a property rights deal as well as the so-called non-discrimination. This has to do with whether or not you, as a property owner, one of the most, pardon the use of the word, one of the most sacred things in our American way of thinking, ownership of property, these people want to basically take away your ownership rights. They want to make it so that you no longer have rights as have been defined for the last 250 years, and they will now be redefined by the LGBT group, and they're big hitters. And they have big hitters as well as big bucks. Yes, is it about religious independence or whatever? Absolutely. Is it about family, protecting your family? Yes, of course. But it also gets into education. What do your children need to learn within the school system, and does the federal government have any right to tell your children things that you don't want them to hear? But really, the basic part of this is about your property rights. You know, our forefathers came to this country, left England, and one of the first things that they did is they came up with this idea of individual ownership. They know all of the property no longer belonged to the crown. Now, John Q. Citizen could own his own piece of property, and it was his or hers to do with as they want. And the government could not poke their nose in their business on that property. If you had 10 acres, you could use that to feed your family or rent it out, whatever you wanted to do. Well, they want to change the rules now, and they basically want the Fair Pocatello people, the LGBT group, want to do away with your constitutional rights, whether it's property or otherwise. Let me remind you of the amendments. Amendment number 1 to the articles. See where I want to start on this. Should we start at number 1? All right, let's go to Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, one of the things the LGBT people want to do is make it a sin, or rather make it a crime, for you to say what they're doing in your eyes is sinful. They want to make that a crime. Abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. They've already made it so that our freedom of speech has been curtailed, and if they don't like something you're saying, they're going to legislate your right to say it out of existence, non-discrimination ordinance. The right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And that brings us to the referendum that was started by a petition that my wife and I started, and with a handful of friends circulated, got almost 2,200 signatures within a very small period of time. Had we had more time, we probably could have easily gotten 3,000. But that whole thing started as our desire to redress what we felt a grievance, because we felt that this non-discrimination ordinance is very unfair. It's completely unfair. If they can tell you who you can rent to, who you can sell to, however you can use your business or your property, that's unfair. If they can curtail your freedom of speech because they don't like to hear what you have to say, that's unfair. If they can tell you that you will accept things in the school district, whether you like it or not, that's unfair. And yet they now have a transgender teacher in school that has been there as a substitute teacher since last year. And I shared with you before how he confused the daylights out of at least one little 8-year-old boy who couldn't understand why this person was a man one day and a woman the next day, and in complete role play each time. That 8-year-old was confused. So this non-discrimination ordinance wants to say that whether you like it or not, you will accept that. And of course the school very pardon me, very, very quietly put into their policy that there could be no discrimination against this person based on their, in this case, this transgender. And it's a male who is transgendering to female, or however you say it. There was very little said about this. It didn't show up in the newspaper that I recall. If there was a public hearing, it was one of those droners that they have that puts everybody asleep in about 5 minutes. So, and it was passed, I guess, by the school board. Most of Mr. and Mrs. Pocatello had no idea that this is now in the school's policy to allow this. And that's one more nail in the coffin, if you will, with this whole thing about the so-called non-discrimination ordinance. So think for a minute now, it isn't just about your religious freedoms. There are many in this community that take a religious perspective on what's being shoved down our throats. And you should have that right. If these folks have their way, you would not have that right. All right. I'm going to show you a DVD that I showed you last week, and it was at the very end of the program, but I want to show it to you again because we're going to discuss how this non-discrimination ordinance is going to affect us and why this is such a big deal that the Human Rights Campaign, on top of Fair Pocatello, and all the other organizations that are pushing this agenda, why this is such a big deal in our little tiny community. Josh, are we good to go on that first one? All right, folks, please watch this.
This is my treasure. Got one for Brenton and New Haven, Missouri, and Edison, Pennsylvania, Birmingham, Alabama. This one is from Sri Lanka, India, and it was a minister who was on a train who met an American who had an article about Arlene's flowers. He calls every week and just says, "How are you doing, sister?" And then I got the Bible from a church in Yakima that came down, and they came to the shop and just said they were behind us and that they were thinking of us, and very, very special. You just want to do something out of the ordinary, something that tickles somebody's fancy or makes them smile or whatever. So just get these ideas in your head, and you really can't describe them. You know, I don't have a theory about it or anything. I just do it. Well, I think most artistic people, you know, especially painters, I think, they put their heart into their arrangements. It's part of them. It's part of who they are. And I think that's the same thing with a florist. The joy of being here so long is you get to know people personally. I don't consider the people that walk in the door customers. They're just people that want something to please somebody else, and that's my job.
She's the most kind, gentlest soul you'll ever meet. If you go into her shop, you're going to get a hug. And so she's very warm. And she had established a really warm relationship with Rob Ingersoll, who had been in 9 years and would come in and spend a good amount of money throughout the year. And they had gotten to know each other pretty well.
He has a very creative mind, and so we just sort of hit it off.
At one point, he decided to get married a few months after same-sex marriage became legal in Washington State. And he, of course, wanted her to do it.
There was a real struggle to decide what to do with that. My husband and I talked it over, and, you know, as much as I love Rob, I just couldn't be a part of that. If I did Rob's wedding, it would be from my heart, because I think he's a really special person, and I would want to make it really special for him. So it wasn't something that I flippantly said, "Oh, I'm not going to do Rob's wedding because he's gay." When I talked to Rob, I did not think this would be a major issue. I was very surprised at that.
The Attorney General's action in this case is unprecedented in Washington State. We have never had an Attorney General take the position that this Attorney General is taking. Now the ACLU's piled on, and the same-sex couple have sued her as well. And interestingly, they have sued her in her personal capacity as well as her business. So she is at great risk. As a result of serving someone lovingly and admittedly in a kind way for 9 years, and because you won't do one same-sex wedding, you're going to lose your house or your business. And she's been working in this business for 40 years. I've read a lot of hate mail over the years, but what I've read in this case just is stunning. It makes you sick to your stomach when just volumes after volumes, thousands of pages.
People are filled with hate and refuse to even listen to what the real story is and how angry and frustrated, and it's just so sad.
This is about marriage. It's not about bigotry. She knew of their relationship. She provided flowers that they sent to each other. But when it came to marriage, that was the line. Because as she'll tell you, marriage represents the relationship of Christ and his church. It's a sacred covenant.
Marriage is a sacred, very sacred thing. You want flowers for your anniversary, your birthday, or whatever, that's fine. But I just cannot do a same-sex marriage.
So this case in particular is coercing someone to engage in expression, and that's against America's tradition, and it's unconstitutional. It's also unnecessary. There are lots of florists. If you look in the Tri-Cities area, there's like 3 pages in the yellow pages of florists that could have served this couple. They've even admitted that after they received enough offers for free wedding arrangements to do 20 different weddings. But yet, what's being set up here is that's not good enough. It's not good enough that there are other florists. We have to coerce everyone to do what we want them to do, even if it violates religious convictions.
I have to have faith that he's going to protect me and give me the courage and the knowledge and the wisdom to stand firm on this. But it's also helped me understand what obedience is and what I'm going to cry and what following Christ is. You know, you can't sit on the fence, like he says. You can't be lukewarm. And that's what I was. I was lukewarm. Darnell, God bless you, sister. We are all praying for you. Stand with you 100%, Pastor Tony. God will hold your hand no matter what. God bless Opal. I will certainly continue to pray for you and thank you for your commitment. Lord bless Dan Greer. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. God bless you, Cheryl Sampson. Rest in Jesus, you're a daughter of the King. That one got me. May God's strength be with you, praying for you, Dave and family. Hope all goes well. Just remember God loves you. Charity Castro.
That is truly a lovely lady with a lovely spirit. And to see what's being done to her, it's too bad well, maybe it is criminal. It's certainly criminal in its intent. Let me show you just, the LGBT people don't like this because it shows a face that they don't want people to see of what's happening and the absolute cruelty of some of the things they're doing to get their own way. But let me share with you, beyond what you've seen here, what a monster this woman is. Ask her employees, they're 10 to 12 on an average day, twice that during big holidays, and many will tell you how Baronelle took them in at a low point in their lives after the divorce, the retirement, or the move to Richland from some other part of the country. She has a kind of sensible sensitivity for giving struggling souls their job, the environment, and the time they need to heal. Now, as she pointed out, this fellow Rob, she's known him, well, this is more than 14 years now. She's known him for 14 years. She knew about his lifestyle. She understood that he had a partner. That was never an issue, and apparently wasn't an issue with either one of them. And he would always come to her for flowers for special occasions because he liked to challenge her, and she liked to be challenged to see how she could make him happy, how she could make the person receiving the flowers happy. So I'm going to read a little bit out of this publication. Is, so it caught Baronell off guard one day when one of her store crew told her that Rob had been in earlier looking for her. He wanted to do the flowers for his same-sex wedding. Same-sex ceremonies became legal in Washington in 2012, and the new law had never impacted Baronell. Now the question was before her. As a Christian, she holds the biblical conviction that marriage is between a man and a woman, a holy symbol of Christ's relationship to his church. Same-sex unions to her do not reflect that relationship. And yet, she says, it was very difficult, she says. My husband and I talked it over, and it basically boiled down to the fact that I could not do Rob's wedding because of my relationship with Christ. She had no doubt at all, she says, about the right thing to do. But telling her friend, Rob, it was hard. The next day, Rob came into the shop eager to share plans for the ceremony and what he'd be wearing, and before he could go any further, I put up my hands, said Baronell. Baronell remembers and said, Rob, I'm so sorry. I cannot do your wedding because of my relationship with Christ. He was very gracious. He said, I understand. And we talked about his mom a little bit and about how he got engaged, and then we hugged each other and he left. Now, apparently his partner got very upset about this and contacted friends, told them to boycott her or whatever. But interestingly enough, it wasn't the partner either. Neither Rob nor the partner went after her, although they have certainly signed on now. They've signed all the papers and they're fully into it now. It was the state attorney general. Nobody had petitioned him. Nobody had asked him to get involved. He had no reason to decide to tune on this other than for political whatever. And he decided, the state attorney general of Washington decided to go after her. Then the ACLU came on board, and that's when the mustard hit the propeller. And now Rob and his partner are both very much involved. And what they're doing here is not trying to redress a grievance. They're not trying to right what they perceive as a wrong. What they're doing is they're trying to destroy this woman. And this is not just an isolated case. This is one that's getting a lot of attention, but it is indicative of what's going on in our country. And that brings me to the point of what's happening here in Pocatello, once again. Because what's happening here in Pocatello is a microcosm of what's happening all over the country. However, a great deal of attention is going to be coming here to Pocatello over the next 2 months, brought on by the Human Rights Campaign, the FAIR campaign people, because they want to make this into a cause célèbre on very grandiose scale. Because as I've explained to you before, if Pocatello overturns this ordinance, this is going to be a huge black eye to the forward momentum of the LGBT agenda. They have been working very hard to get Pocatello into the sphere of influence so that they can go to the state, as they have been doing with Nicole Lefevre and her band of merry protesters, and so that they can force the state to abrogate their responsibility and put in those so-called 4 words so that they can have legal weddings and everything else here. And if Idaho can tip over, they can go to the rest of the nation, certainly to Congress, and they can say, look at Idaho. I mean, come on, they're 60% LDS. They're the most conservative state in the union. They said it's okay. We need this as a national law. Believe me, folks, it has national implications, national ramifications. What's happening here, there's going to be a lot of pressure brought to bear here because they need to keep this ordinance in place. And it is unfair to the whole community that they should be allowed to do that. And I'm telling you, I'm asking you again and again, as I have many times, be sure you vote yes on Proposition 1. Yes meaning we want it to go away. Yes, do away with this ordinance. We think it is unfair to the whole community. Here's a quote from Ben Stein. You know who Ben Stein is? He was on television again today in Ferris Bueller's was it his Vacation or whatever it is. One of my favorite shows, and I can't even remember the proper title. Fathom the hypocrisy of a government that requires every citizen to prove they're insured, but not everyone must prove they are a citizen. And now any of those who refuse or are unable to prove they are citizens will receive free insurance paid by those who are forced to buy insurance because they are citizens. Good point. It does definitely go to the hypocrisy of government. A little off point here, but it kind of points out the hypocrisy of what's happening here. A couple letters to the editor that I want to share with you. This one is It has the potential to be big. I don't think it will be. I think it'll, just like so many things here in the city, will be kind of swept under the rug. But I'm so glad to see this very short letter. Came out on, yesterday, 25th. Congrats to Councilman Michael Orr for investigating potential irregularities regarding bid for Pocatello Police sidearms. I've done business with Sam. He's an honorable businessman. Salt Lake City Wholesale does business in at least 3 states, Nevada, Utah, and Idaho. See their website. I would bet a week's pay their gross revenue is in the multi-millions of dollars. I wholeheartedly agree we should support local businesses whenever we can, even if it costs us a few extra bucks. According to the Idaho State Journal, it is interesting to note that the bid, now this was for new guns for the police department, the bid from Salt Lake SLW to Captain Shy is addressed as Roger. So it's a personal letter to Captain Roger Shy. The letter goes on, in my opinion, there appears to be a conflict of interest or restraint of trade issue with respect to Captain Shy and his dealings with Salt Lake Wholesale and the subsequent fallout between Glock and Sam. Not Sam, the gun owner for Sam's Guns. I don't recall the name of it. Sam's very well known in town. I could tell you how to get to his shop, but I can't remember the proper name for his store. But Councilman Orr, I think it is incumbent that you pursue these issues with all your vigor, and that's from Gary Wodick in Pocatello. And Gary, thanks for pointing that out. It'd be interesting to see if that goes anywhere, or if so many things here in our little town, just kind of gets swept under the carpet. I've read this to you every week for several weeks. I'm going to read it again. I want this to become indelibly imprinted on your brain, as it hopefully will be on all of ours, especially May 20th. This is a quote, and it's from this book that I've told you about several times, The Homosexualization of America, by Dennis Altman. The quote is right out of the book: "The greatest single victory of the gay movement over the past decade has been to shift the debate from behavior to identity, thus forcing opponents into a position where they can be seen as attacking the civil rights of homosexual citizens." And that is from this book as a direct quote. And if you think about this whole business with this so-called non-discrimination ordinance, they have formulated this to make it look like it's discrimination against some people, but in reality, the non-discrimination ordinance discriminates against all of us meaning non-LGBT, which of course is the bulk of the community. I've seen so many different things in the paper recently, people saying that it's not fair for the big group to beat up on the little group, and I've seen others saying, well, it's not fair for the little group to overly influence the big group. Depending on, no matter how you see it, the fact is that this very small but well-organized, very well-heeled group is going to make you buy into their program or else. And so you have to stand tall. You have to stand strong and not let them force you into it. Do you remember the big fluff a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago today, in the Wall Street Journal was an article about the Arizona Religious Freedom Act that became a test case? Well, it was interesting to see, and we've covered most of that, so I'm only going to highlight it. The Arizona bill, the proposed bill that Jan Brewer signed, she vetoed it under tremendous pressure. But the Arizona bill adds businesses, churches, and foundations to the list of entities protected under the state's religious freedom law, which says the state may not substantially burden the free practice of religion without compelling interest. It also allows individuals and businesses to assert religious freedom as a defense, even when the government isn't a party to a legal proceeding. And then it goes on, there's some more in here. And it was one of several of these kinds of laws that were being pushed forward or being thought of, considered by different states, Georgia and some others. The federal law passed by Congress in 1993 says the U.S. government may not put a substantial burden on a person's exercise of religion unless it advances a compelling government interest and is the least restrictive means of furthering it. And then in Oregon, the backers launched an effort to get on an initiative on the ballot to allow business owners to opt out of playing a role in same-sex commitment ceremonies based on religious belief. And a California pastor is behind a ballot effort that would protect individuals from any action that would violate their liberty of conscience based on biblical authority. And of course, once again, now that one failed. They couldn't get the number of signatures they needed. Some religious groups are feeling pressured by the expansion of gay rights and the federal Affordable Care Act's mandate that employers pay for contraceptives. Now today, I'm sorry, I guess it was yesterday, the Supreme Court heard arguments on the Hobby Lobby, and I forget the name of the other group, but their cabinet makers group, I think they're Amish or no, Mennonite group. And both of these businesses said, we can't do this Affordable Care Act part about contraceptive because it's contrary to their religion. And the federal government has gone after both these companies to, not just to get them to set them straight, they want to destroy them. They want to destroy anybody who has the temerity or the audacity to step up. Just like good old Mike O'Donnell likes to go after me, not because he has anything really to say, but it's to try to stifle me, to shut me up. In fact, it was very interesting the other day at one of the sessions here in the city when it was, I think it was a budget hearing, I forget the proper term for it, but when it came to some part of the budget, I had a friend of mine call me and said, quickly, go to Channel 12, they're talking about Channel 12. And I did, and I got there just after the fact, but apparently Eva Nye doesn't see why we need to have Channel 12 for whatever reason, but she doesn't like some of the things that are broadcast on Channel 12. Well, now that isn't that interesting. This is the same Eva Nye that asked me when I spoke to the city council if I thought they, meaning the city council, should allow me to do this referendum. Eva Nye seems to be a little confused on what it says in this little booklet about our rights. She seems to be a little confused about a lot of things, but I'm really kind of surprised. Now, I'm not surprised that she wants to do away with Channel 12, because that's one of the very few voices that the right gets in this community. The left gets a lot of voice. Certainly the Idaho State Journal gives them plenty of print, probably 5 or 6 times to every one of any con side. But I thought it indicative of where she's coming from, that she feels that this Channel 12, Vision 12, which is the only community access channel available, she thinks that it's a waste of money. She doesn't understand that the money comes from franchise fees, among other things, that is part of federal money that the state already accepts for this very purpose, for both the government channel and the public access channel. So in other words, you and I, Mr. and Mrs. Pocatello, are not strapped paying for Channel 12 or Channel 11. That is paid for. Yes, I mean, if you took it back to the very beginning, certainly we all are paying taxes. But I find it interesting that she would like to see Channel 12 go away because she doesn't like some of the programming. I wonder which programs she doesn't like most. Well, Miss Nye, if you're watching this one, it's still, even though you haven't given us permission to speak, still a free country, as they say. See if I have a couple. Let's see if we can get to some quick ones. Here's one that I find, it came to just the other day. Let's see, this was on Monday, the 24th. This is out of the Wall Street Journal. Now, I was telling you last week and the week before, we talked about a little bit about Common Core and what a disaster that will be. And I mentioned to you that there were at least 4 states, maybe 5, that started off at the very beginning and said, we don't want any part of this. Well, now Indiana has decided they don't want any part of it, and they were one of the first, if not the first, to sign on to Common Core. So they've seen what's going on now, and they've said, you know what, we're going to create our own education standards. We don't need the feds poking their nose under the tent flap. We'll do it ourselves. Common Core, go home. And because it came out of Indiana, this could have far-reaching implications. Indiana's governor on Monday signed legislation withdrawing the state from the Common Core, making it the first to officially dump math and reading standards that have been adopted by nearly all of the states. Remember, I shared with you this new progressive reasoning that they have for the Common Core in mathematics, where a child was asked, I forget the figure, 100, 112, what it was, how do you get to the point of finding out how many people in the room it takes to make 112? And instead of doing simple division, 8 into 112 or whatever the question was, the child had to sit there and make circles for each student in the room and then draw hash marks in the circles, in other words, counting on his fingers and toes, until he was eventually able to come up with the answer. Now, if you, and this is very intellectually superior, if you had the audacity to go in there and say, well, you just divide 8 into 112. Wrong answer. You have to go through, it's like returning to the Stone Age, where people were counting on their toes once they figured out how to count, and then making marks on the, hieroglyphic marks on the wall. That's what they're going to try to do, or they're already doing with our children when it comes to something as simple as math. And eventually, or ultimately, there is no right or wrong answer. They want to see how you work through it. They don't care if you don't get it right. Folks, this is a disaster going out of its way to happen. So I was very glad to see the Wall Street Journal had a nice piece on doing away with this altogether. The Republican Senator Dennis Cruz, author of Indiana Should Be in Charge of Its Own Education System So We Maintain Indiana Sovereignty, he said, we don't want a cookie-cutter education system. They want to be able to educate at the local level, which is always best. You know, Mom and Dad, if you had the time, and many of you do take the time to educate your children at home, you would do so, and you know that they would get a better education 9 out of 10 times because they wouldn't have the interference of the drugs and the sexualization of their little minds and all the other peripheral garbage that's going on in the school system. Well, there's another aspect to this whole LGBT thing that's kind of, it's a peripheral thing and yet it's not so peripheral. And Mike, could you tune up number 2 and we'll get that, Josh, could you tune up number 2? And I'm going to just read this article and then we'll go for it. Thanks, buddy. This is out of the Washington Times. I just pulled this up today. It was in yesterday's Washington Times. And it's titled, Sailors Leaving Navy Over Stress on Social Issues by a fellow named Rowan Scarborough. A Navy F-18 fighter pilot and former Top Gun instructor is publicly warning admirals that retention is beginning to suffer from the military's relentless social conditioning programs. Commander Guy Snodgrass, until recently a Pentagon speechwriter for the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Jonathan Greenert, said sailors are becoming fed up with the constant emphasis on social issues, an apparent reference to gays in the military, women in combat, and ending sexual harassment. Quoting, sailors continue to cite the overfocus on social issues by senior leadership above and beyond discussions on warfighting, a fact that demoralizes junior and mid-grade officers alike. Commander Snodgrass wrote this month on the U.S. Naval Institute website, an independent forum for active and retired sailors and Marines. It is a remarkably frank assessment from an upwardly mobile fighter pilot who is due to become the executive officer of an F-18 unit in Japan. He says one troubling sign already has emerged, a drop in applications to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis last year. The U.S. Navy has a looming officer retention problem. Commander Snodgrass writes, adding there is an erosion of trust in senior leadership. And if you haven't seen this on the internet, Obama and his minions have been cashiering senior flag officers at an astounding rate. In other words, he's sweeping out all of the veteran people who have put our military together. He's getting rid of them so he can have his sycophants in place to do social engineering. Going on, Snodgrass says retention racked up its worst year in history for the special warfare community, including Navy SEALs, with a record number of lieutenants declining to stay. Lieutenants are the entry-level mainstay of the Navy. You know, these are the guys that are just into management and are on their way to careers. In the Army, the Air Force, and Marine Corps, the lieutenant is a captain. Full lieutenant is a captain. The aviation side had a goal of 45% take rate and retention bonuses, but only got 36%. Unfortunately, Commander Snodgrass says in his 24-page study, the fact that a growing number of quality officers have already left the service or planning to head for the door seems to be going undetected by leadership. I think we have just enough time to hit this. Now, this is a piece that I picked up from Tammy Bruce, and if you don't know who Tammy Bruce is, you should. She is a very honest, forthright, out-of-the-closet lesbian, very feminine looking. Our time rolled over. I guess we're not going to have the time. Well, we'll get it in next week. Anyway, Tammy has it's a 5-minute piece on the feminization, let's see, what she called it? The new feminism. And what she talks about, and this is a woman who, on national television, on Fox television, I was watching when she made the statement, she was talking about the fact that, yes, she is a lesbian. She is not an activist. She is not an in-your-face lesbian. She said, I was not born this way. I chose this lifestyle knowing full well what I'm into. When you look at Tammy, you might think she's somebody's mother. She's attractive. She's well-groomed. There's nothing about her, unless she tells you, that would lead you to know that she's lesbian. But she has some very definite points of view on what's happening to the nation. And one of the things she has a real strong point of view on is the feminization of the men of the country, and what the feminists, and I hesitate to use that word because it is so ill-used, but the feminist movement has gone out of its way to emasculate the men of the nation. And Tammy Bryce, who is a lesbian, she certainly has no man in her life, is very frank about this. It is refreshing to see somebody in the LGBT community who is honest, frank, and willing to talk on a mature level basis about the reality of what's going on. We will be talking about this for the next couple months, and I apologize. I know it seems sometimes like this is all we have to talk about. It's not. There are other things, but since the heavy hitters have decided to come to town, and they're going to be going after this with a vengeance, and I deliberately use that word because you can expect some real fur to fly, some real fireworks. It's going to get pretty interesting around here, and I expect that the Idaho State Journal will have a major share of information coming out on a regular basis, as they do, supporting the LGBT stuff, and very little on the other side. All right, quick reminder, if you haven't already done so, get this book, The Homosexualization of America by Dennis Altman. Get it on the secondary market. Don't pay a lot of money for it, but you need to know what's going on here. And this other book, which is also very, very illustrative of the whole LGBT movement and why and what it is, pardon me, it's called After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. It's a little dated, but the information is absolutely current. And this is by Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen. Again, buy it on the secondary market. Don't spend a lot of money. You can get either one of these books for probably no more than $1 plus postage and handling. But you need to read these, and then you will see, as I have said when Glenn Alford wrote that there is no homosexual agenda, it is. It's right here. They make no bones about it. And then, keep the faith. Stay strong. Don't be bullied by the LGBT bigots who are determined to make you into something you're not. You're a good person. You're good people. And you have every right to protect your property, your family, your religious heritage. Your very freedoms are at risk. You have every right to protect them. So go to the polls on the 20th of May and vote yes on Proposition 1. And until next time, God bless you and yours. Please remember to pray for our nation, pray for Israel, and stay strong. And we'll see you in a week. God bless you. Good night.